What happens when a millionaire, living in isolation and haunted by his past, hires a struggling maid whose courage and honesty force him to face the life he's been avoiding? Stay with us for a heartwarming tale of transformation, healing, and hope. Jason Harlow had everything a man could want: wealth, power, and influence. As the CEO of a multi-million-dollar empire, he seemed to have it all. His mansion, perched high atop the city's skyline, was a testament to his success. The floors were polished, the rooms vast and luxurious, and yet, despite the endless luxuries that surrounded him, there was an emptiness that could not be filled. It was a loneliness so profound that even the finest art and architecture could not mask it. Jason had no one to share his triumphs with, no one to turn to when the weight of his ambition became too much to bear. The death of his younger brother, Kyle, years ago, left him with a wound that never fully healed. It wasn't just the loss of Kyle, but the strained relationship they had. Unspoken words, an unresolved tension that never had the chance to be addressed before Kyle's untimely death. The void that remained had become the defining feature of Jason's existence. He worked tirelessly, focusing all his energy on expanding his empire, hoping that success might eventually fill the hole in his heart, but it never did. But outside the world of mansions and boardrooms, there was Emma Scott, a single mother who lived in a modest apartment in the heart of the city. Emma didn't have the luxury of time. Every moment was spent working 2 jobs, one as a waitress at a diner, the other as a cleaner in various businesses around town. She did it all for her son, Ethan, who was the light of her life. Every day, Emma juggled exhaustion and the crushing weight of bills, trying to make sure that Ethan had everything he needed. Life was a struggle, but Emma's determination to give her son a better future kept her going, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Emma received a call that would alter the course of her life forever. It was an unexpected call from Harlow Enterprises, offering her a housekeeping position at the grand mansion of none other than Jason Harlow himself. At first, Emma was skeptical. She had worked in wealthy homes before, cleaning after people who lived in a world so far removed from her own. She had always felt like an outsider, someone who didn't belong. But this was different. This was a job that could help her secure a better future for Ethan. The offer was too good to pass up. The following day, Emma stood at the gates of Jason Harlow's mansion, her heart racing. The size of the estate was overwhelming. She had seen homes like this before, but never from the inside. As she stepped inside the grand foyer, the opulence took her breath away. Marble floors, sparkling chandeliers, and walls lined with expensive artwork. She couldn't help but feel out of place in such an environment. As the butler led her through the house, Emma's nerves started to settle. She had a job to do, and no matter how different this world was from her own, she was determined to get it right. Jason, on the other hand, was oblivious to the struggles of people like Emma. He spent his days working behind closed doors, buried in paperwork and business deals. He had no real connection with anyone in his life. His relationships were transactional at best, each one serving a purpose in his business empire. The few people who remained in his life, his staff, his mentor Miss Grace, had become little more than background characters in the life he had built for himself. No one could break through the walls he had erected to protect himself from the pain of his past. And yet, despite his best efforts, the loneliness was always there, lurking beneath the surface. For Emma, her first day as a maid at the mansion was a test of resilience. The mansion was both magnificent and cold, like a grand fortress of wealth. Jason barely interacted with her, his attention focused solely on business matters. She went about her duties, cleaning the halls and dusting the countless rooms, never once imagining that the man who owned this vast home was just as lonely as she felt in her own life. Jason had no idea that Emma's presence in his life, though fleeting at first, would soon be the catalyst for a series of events that would lead both of them to confront their deepest fears and desires. As the days passed, Emma settled into her new role, and though the mansion remained as impersonal as ever, There were moments where she felt a strange connection to the house itself. It wasn't just the physical space that drew her in. It was the sense that someone, somewhere within its walls, was in need of something more. Little did she know, that person was Jason. His loneliness wasn't something that could be fixed with wealth or status. It was something deeper, a wound that had festered for years, untouched and unseen by the world around him. But all of that was about to change. As the days turned into weeks, Emma became more familiar with the mansion. She cleaned the polished floors, wiped down the grand staircases, and polished the crystal chandeliers that hung from the ceiling like frozen raindrops. But she couldn't escape the feeling that someone, was missing. The house was grand, yes, but it felt empty. It was as though Jason had built it not to house a family, but to keep people out, to isolate himself from the world around him. Emma began to wonder if he even noticed the void that seemed to grow larger each day. She was just a maid, but there were times when she felt like she was cleaning not only the house, but the remnants of a life that had been left behind. It wasn't long before Ethan, Emma's son, began to visit the mansion. He was curious about the grand house his mother worked in, and Emma couldn't deny him the chance to see it. She had always done everything for Ethan, and if this was a part of her life now, she wanted him to understand it. What she didn't expect, however, was the bond that would form between Ethan and Jason. Ethan, with his childlike innocence, wasn't afraid of the mansion's towering walls or the cold, impersonal halls. Instead, he found the joy in its vastness. He would run through the corridors, his laughter echoing through the empty rooms, reminding Jason of a time when his world was filled with life and love. One afternoon, Ethan was playing near the grand fireplace when Jason walked in. He stood in the doorway, unsure of how to approach the young boy. Ethan, noticing him, smiled and immediately invited him to join the game. Jason, taken aback by the invitation, hesitated for a moment, then decided to sit down, watching Ethan play with an enthusiasm he hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long while, Jason allowed himself to simply be present. As they played, Jason couldn't help but notice how different Ethan was from the adults he usually interacted with. There was no pretense in the boy, no need to maintain appearances. It was refreshing, and Jason began to feel a sense of something he had long forgotten: human connection. Meanwhile, Emma, as she continued her work at the mansion, began to uncover pieces of Jason's past. She discovered old photos hidden in a leather-bound album on a shelf in the library. One photo caught her eye. It was of a young Jason with another man, laughing and smiling as if the world was at their feet. As Emma stared at the photo, something about the man in the picture seemed so familiar. A flash of recognition hit her. This man looked like her late husband. The resemblance was uncanny. Her heart skipped a beat as she wondered if there was a connection between Jason and her husband, who had tragically passed away a few years ago. Emma was overwhelmed with curiosity and a growing sense of unease. What was Jason's connection to her late husband? One evening, Emma found herself face to face with Jason in the library, the album of photos still in her hand. Jason, looking out the window, didn't notice her approach at first. When he did, his eyes immediately fell on the photo she was holding. There was a moment of silence between them, a tension that hung heavy in the air. Finally, Jason spoke, his voice soft but laden with emotion. "That's Kyle," Jason said, his voice betraying a mix of nostalgia and sorrow. "My brother. He was everything to me." His eyes softened as he spoke, and Emma could see the pain behind his words. For a moment, Emma didn't know what to say. She had only heard bits and pieces about Jason's brother, Kyle. She knew he had died, but she didn't know the circumstances. She didn't know the story behind the sadness that lingered in Jason's eyes whenever his brother was mentioned. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered, unsure of what else to say. Jason gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. His gaze drifted back to the photo, his mind seemingly lost in memories he had long buried. As the days passed, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Jason's story than he was willing to share. cold, distant man she saw every day was starting to crack. She had seen glimpses of warmth in him, small moments of humanity that spoke of a man who had once been full of life and love. She began to feel a sense of empathy for him, not just as her employer, but as a person who had experienced pain, just like she had. She didn't know it yet, but this connection was the first step in breaking through the walls Jason had so carefully constructed around himself. Ethan, with his innocent curiosity, continued to be the bridge between them. He would ask Jason questions that no adult dared to, questions that forced Jason to think about his life and the choices he had made. One afternoon, as Ethan sat beside Jason on the grand staircase, he innocently asked, "Why are you always alone, Mr. Harlow?" The question hung in the air, simple yet cutting. Jason's expression faltered for a moment. He had never been asked that before, not in such an innocent, straightforward way. It made him pause, made him confront the reality of his situation. He looked at Ethan, the boy's wide eyes full of curiosity and concern, and for the first time in a long while, Jason didn't feel the need to hide. He simply said, "I don't know, Ethan. I don't know." In the weeks that followed, Jason began to open up more to Emma, and even to Ethan. They became a regular part of his life. Slowly, Jason found himself talking to Emma more, his cold exterior thawing with each conversation. He started to look forward to her visits, to the moments when he could just sit and talk with someone who wasn't there because of his money or his status. He wasn't sure why, but Emma made him feel seen, truly seen, in a way that no one had for years. The walls he had built around his heart were beginning to crumble. The day of reckoning had finally arrived. Jason had been avoiding the conversation he knew was inevitable, but deep down, he knew it was time. Ethan's innocent questions had made him confront the painful truth of his isolation. Emma, with her quiet strength, had unknowingly chipped away at his carefully constructed walls. And now, in the quiet of the mansion, with the weight of everything that had happened between them, Jason knew that the truth had to come out. His past, his regrets, the reason for his endless solitude. Everything needed to be laid bare. It was late afternoon when it happened. The sun cast long shadows over the grand estate, filling the rooms with a golden light that felt strangely intimate. Emma was cleaning the library, as she often did, and Jason was sitting at the desk, reviewing business papers. The silence between them was comfortable, yet there was a palpable tension in the air. Emma had known that Jason was struggling, but she had never pressed him for answers. Until now. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. "Jason," Emma said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency. "There's something we need to talk about. I've seen the photos. I know you've lost someone you loved. I think I know who he is." Jason froze, his hand stopping mid-motion over a set of papers. He looked up at her, his eyes wide with surprise and something else. Fear, perhaps. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick, charged with the weight of unspoken words. Jason's gaze dropped to the desk, and Emma could see the muscles in his jaw tighten. "You're right," Jason said finally, his voice low. "Kyle was my brother. He was everything to me. But I failed him. I failed him in ways I can't undo." His voice cracked slightly, and Emma felt the heartbreak in those words, as if they were a confession. He didn't meet her eyes, instead staring at the papers as though they could offer him some kind of solace. Emma stepped closer, not knowing what to say, but knowing that now, Jason needed to talk. And for the first time in years, he seemed to want to. "What happened?" Emma asked, her voice gentle, coaxing but not demanding. Jason took a deep breath, and when he spoke again, it was as if the dam had finally broken. "Kyle and we had a falling out. It was over a stupid argument, something that shouldn't have mattered. But I let my pride get in the way. He wanted to take over the family business. He wanted me to help him, but I refused. I was too focused on my empire, on building my wealth and power." I didn't see how much he needed me, how much we both needed each other. He left, and I didn't try to stop him. And then, he died in an accident. I never got the chance to make things right. I lost him, and I couldn't do a damn thing to bring him back. Emma listened in silence, feeling the raw pain in his words. It was the pain of regret, of wishing for something that could never be. But as Jason continued to speak, she began to understand the root of his isolation. It wasn't just about losing Kyle. It was about the guilt that had haunted him ever since. The guilt that had made him close himself off from everyone else, to the point where he couldn't even let someone like her in. I didn't know how to live after that, Jason confessed. I buried myself in work, in the mansion, in everything that kept me busy. But it was all just a distraction. And now, here you are, Emma, reminding me of everything I've lost. And you, Ethan, too. I see the way he looks at me, and it breaks my heart. I've wasted so much time, I don't even know how to start over. Emma took a deep breath. She had always known there was more to Jason's cold demeanor than met the eye. Now she understood. She had been through her own pain. Losing her husband had left a void in her life that she could never fill. But she had learned to keep going, for Ethan, for herself. And now, as she looked at Jason, she realized that they were not so different after all. They were both just two people trying to heal from wounds they didn't know how to fix. Jason, Emma said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to do this alone. You don't have to carry the weight of your past by yourself. It's never too late to change. I know that firsthand. Her words hung in the air, and for the first time in years, Jason felt the heaviness of his guilt begin to lift, even if just a little. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with gratitude and something else, hope. But before Jason could say anything, a cry echoed from the hallway. It was Ethan. His voice was laced with fear and pain, and in an instant, both Jason and Emma were on their feet, rushing toward the source of the sound. They found Ethan at the foot of the stairs, his knee scraped and bleeding. He had fallen while playing in the grand hall. His laughter turned to tears. Jason knelt beside him, his hands shaking slightly as he examined the injury. Ethan, are you okay? Jason asked, his voice filled with concern. Ethan winced but nodded, tears streaming down his face. I'm fine, just a little scraped, he whispered. But Jason could see the fear in his eyes, the pain that went beyond the physical injury. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. It wasn't just a scraped knee. This was a moment of reckoning. Jason realized something that he had been avoiding for so long. He had the power to protect, to love, to make things right. He couldn't change the past, but he could change the future. With great care, Jason picked Ethan up in his arms, carrying him to the sitting room, where Emma quickly tended to the wound. As she cleaned the scrape, Jason's mind raced. He had been so lost in his own grief that he had missed the most important thing in life: human connection. In this moment, with Ethan in his arms and Emma by his side, Jason finally understood what truly mattered. It wasn't the wealth, the mansion, or even the power he had worked so hard to build. It was the people in his life. It was love. As the evening wore on, Jason made a silent promise to himself. He would change. He would stop running from his past and face the future with the people who mattered most. He would no longer let guilt control him, and he would no longer allow fear to keep him from loving and living again. The days that followed Ethan's fall were filled with quiet changes. Jason Harlow, the man who had once been lost in his own world of guilt and isolation, was now beginning to find his way back. It wasn't a dramatic transformation overnight, but the small shifts were undeniable. He spent more time with Ethan, teaching him chess and reading stories from his childhood. With each passing day, Jason could feel the walls around his heart crumble just a little bit more. Emma noticed the difference in Jason, too. The man who had once been a silent, distant figure in the mansion, had become a more engaged and compassionate person. The once cold, lifeless house now echoed with laughter. Ethan's innocent curiosity sparked something in Jason, a desire to live life fully, to embrace moments of joy and connection that he had long neglected. One evening, as the three of them sat in the sitting room, Jason turned to Emma with a look of quiet determination. "I want to do more," he said, his voice firm but filled with a new sense of purpose. "I want to make sure Ethan's future is brighter than mine. I want him to grow up knowing that he can be anything, that he has people who believe in him. And I want to do that for other kids too." Emma listened closely, her heart swelling with pride for the man who had once seemed so closed off. She could see the change in his eyes, the same spark that had been missing for so long. Jason was no longer the millionaire who only cared about his empire. He was becoming a man who cared about people, who saw beyond the bottom line, and who understood the importance of family and community. Jason's newfound sense of purpose extended beyond his time with Ethan. He began to make calls and meet with educators, nonprofit leaders, and community organizers. It wasn't just about philanthropy for him anymore. It was about making a real difference, about giving children like Ethan the opportunities they deserved, about building a future that wasn't just about wealth, but about human connection and support. And as he sat in those meetings, listening to others who shared his vision, Jason began to realize just how much his own life had been driven by fear and pride. It was never too late to start over, to change the course of his life and his legacy. But he couldn't do it alone. He needed Emma by his side. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Jason and Emma found themselves alone in the living room, sipping tea. It was a quiet moment, but it held so much meaning. The air between them had shifted. They were no longer just employer and employee. They were two people who had shared their deepest wounds and had begun to heal together. "Emma?" Jason said softly, breaking the silence. "I don't know where this journey is going, but I want you to know that I'm committed to making things right. Not just for Ethan, but for you too. You've been here for me when I didn't deserve it. You've shown me a kind of strength I never thought possible. I want to give back, to show you that you matter." Emma smiled, a soft, knowing smile that spoke volumes. "Jason, I've always believed in you," she replied, her voice steady but warm. "You just needed to believe in yourself." She paused for a moment and then added, "And you've already begun to do that." In the following weeks, Jason's transformation became more visible to everyone around him. The mansion, once an empty shell, now became a gathering place, a space where community members came together to share ideas, celebrate milestones, and support one another. The cold, imposing house had become a home, filled with warmth and laughter. One of Jason's first initiatives was to launch a foundation for underprivileged children, providing scholarships and mentorships for those who had the potential but lacked the resources. The foundation was not just a way to give money away. It was a symbol of his commitment to changing the narrative of his life, to leaving behind a legacy that would outlast his wealth. And it wasn't just about the foundation. Jason made changes within his own company, shifting the focus from profits to people. He implemented family support programs, improved employee benefits, and created initiatives that gave his workers opportunities for growth, development, and fulfillment. His business practices reflected his new values, and it was clear that he was leading his company toward a future that valued humanity over numbers. Through it all, Emma remained by his side, not just as an employee, but as a partner in this new chapter of his life. She helped him navigate the complexities of his changes, providing insights and support as they built something meaningful together. Jason knew that none of this would have been possible without her, without the woman who had opened his eyes to what truly mattered. Meanwhile, Ethan thrived under Jason's guidance. The young boy, who had once been a curious visitor to the mansion, had become a key part of Jason's transformation. He was the reminder of all that was good in life, the pure, untainted joy that could come from simply being present, from showing up for the people you care about. Jason began to teach Ethan everything he knew, Not just about business, but about life. About how to live with integrity, kindness, and a sense of responsibility. Jason and Emma's bond deepened, evolving from mutual respect into a true partnership. They leaned on each other, learning from each other, and building a future together that neither of them had ever imagined. For the first time in a long while, Jason felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had found what he had been searching for all along: connection, purpose, and love. Months passed, and the changes Jason had made continued to reverberate through his life and the lives of those around him. His once immense mansion, which had stood as a symbol of isolation and loneliness, had transformed into a beacon of warmth and hope. It was no longer just a place where he hid away from the world. It was now a home that radiated love, purpose, and community. Jason's foundation for underprivileged children had grown beyond his wildest expectations. Children from all walks of life were being supported, educated, and mentored, giving them a chance at a future they might not have had otherwise. Jason's business practices had shifted, and his company was now known for its ethical approach, focusing on the well-being of its employees, fostering a culture of respect and support that had never existed before. One crisp afternoon, Jason stood on the balcony of his mansion, watching the world go by. Emma stood beside him, a quiet smile on her face as she observed him. The weight of the past was gone. Jason had let go of his guilt, his fear, and his loneliness. He had embraced life with a new sense of purpose, one that went beyond wealth and success. His wealth was now used not for self-indulgence, but for the betterment of others. "It feels different," Jason said softly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Like I'm finally seeing the world clearly, for the first time in years. I've spent so long building an empire, but what I really want now is to build something that matters, something that lasts." Emma glanced up at him, her eyes filled with pride. "You've already started building it," she said. "It's not just about the foundation or the company. It's about the people you've touched, the lives you've changed. You've done more than you realize." As Jason turned to face her, he could see the love and respect shining in her eyes. He had started out as a man trapped in his own world, but now he was someone who had come to understand what truly mattered: love, connection, and the power of giving. He realized that this journey wasn't just about saving others. It was about saving himself, too. And he owed it all to Emma, the woman who had refused to give up on him. Later that evening, a large gathering took place in the mansion's grand dining room. Community leaders, employees, and families whose lives had been changed by Jason's foundation were all present. There was laughter, music, and an undeniable sense of unity in the air. For the first time, Jason felt at peace. This was the family he had built, the one that had helped him rediscover his humanity. In the midst of the celebration, Jason looked around and saw faces filled with joy, gratitude, and hope. Ethan ran by with a group of children, his laughter filling the room as he played. The future was now brighter than it had ever been, and it was because of the choices Jason had made, the choices to open his heart, to be vulnerable, and to connect with those around him. As the evening came to a close, Jason stood on the steps of the mansion, looking out at the guests below. Emma joined him, standing beside him in quiet solidarity. It had been a long road, but they had made it, together. "You know," Jason said with a grin, "this place feels a lot more like home than it ever did before, and it's all thanks to you." Emma chuckled softly, shaking her head. "It wasn't just me, Jason. You've done the hard work. You've made the choices. You've changed." Jason looked down at her, his heart full. "We did it together, Emma. We did it together. Sometimes we're given a second chance to make things right, to rewrite our story and create a future that's not defined by our past mistakes, but by the choices we make in the present. For me, that second chance came in the form of a maid with the courage to challenge me, a boy with a smile that lit up my world, and a woman who reminded me of what it truly means to love and care. it's never too late to change. It's never too late to build something that matters. Jason's story is a testament to the power of transformation, the healing that comes with self-reflection, and the incredible ways people can change when they open their hearts to others. His journey wasn't just about wealth, success, or the empire he built. It was about understanding what truly matters. Sometimes, the people we least expect can teach us the most about ourselves. As you watch Jason's transformation unfold, you might find yourself reflecting on your own life. Have you ever experienced a moment where you felt lost, disconnected, or unsure of your purpose? How did you find your way back to what really mattered? It's easy to get caught up in the pursuit of success, in the desire to have more, to achieve more, and to climb higher. But what if the real success comes not from accumulating wealth, but from building meaningful connections with the people who matter most? What if you could look at the world through a different lens? A lens of empathy, love, and human connection? What would that change in your own life? Jason's story shows us that it's never too late to make a difference, to embrace change, and to build something that lasts. No matter where you are in your own journey, remember that transformation is possible, and sometimes all it takes is one choice to change everything. We want to hear from you. What would you do if given a second chance to connect with someone? What lessons have you learned from your own struggles? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else who needs it. If you've been moved by Jason's story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an inspiring tale that might just change your perspective on life. Thank you for watching, and remember, it's never too late to change, to heal, and to make a real difference in the world. Until next time, take a moment to reflect on your own journey, and remember, the most important thing you can build is the connection you share with others.